The wind howled outside the wooden cabin, rattling the shutters like the cries of restless spirits. Inside, the flicker of the fireplace painted the walls in shifting shades of orange and shadow, and the smell of burnt wood mixed with the faint aroma of stew that had been left, cooling on the hearth. The frontier was unforgiving. Storms, hunger, bandits, and worse, but inside this little cabin, for a moment there was safety. Martha, the settler cook, sat hunched on the old chair, her dress torn at the shoulder, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. Her left hand was swollen and bruised, wrapped hastily in a strip of linen already dark with blood. Across from her knelt Ethan Graves, a rancher so broad and towering that folks in town called him the Giant of Silver Valley. He had just returned from rounding up cattle when he found Martha staggering near the creek, clutching her arm like it had been crushed in an iron vise. Ethan asked what happened, but Martha's voice had broken under the weight of tears. Only later, when he carefully cleaned her wound, did she whisper the truth. "They broke my hand, sir." Her voice was a rasp, almost ashamed as though it were her fault. Her eyes glistened with pain and something deeper, something rawer, fear mixed with defiance. Ethan's hands froze, his jaw tightening as he looked at her mangled hand. He already knew who had done it. The rival ranch hands from the Blackthorn gang, men who believed cruelty was strength. They had come earlier that day demanding Martha cook for them instead of Ethan's ranch. When she refused, they decided to teach her a lesson. They thought breaking her hand would break her spirit. But Martha, trembling and in agony, lifted her chin. "But I'll keep cooking," she said. Her words burned in the air, cutting through the silence heavier than thunder. Ethan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Most folks would have collapsed into despair. But here she was, defiant in the face of cruelty, declaring she would continue the one thing that gave her meaning. Ethan's weathered face hardened. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about dignity, survival, and the spirit of the frontier. He bound her hand as best as he could, wrapping the linen tight, though he knew cooking with such an injury would be nearly impossible. Yet Martha's eyes didn't waver. She was determined. "You don't have to prove anything," he told her in his deep, rumbling voice. "You've already shown more strength than any man." "I know." But she shook her head. "Strength is nothing if I stop doing what I was meant to do." That night, Martha insisted on finishing supper for the ranch crew. With her good hand, she chopped herbs and stirred the pot, wincing with every movement. The men, hardened cow hands who rarely showed emotion, sat silent, watching her cook. They could see the struggle, but they also saw her fire. When Ethan brought her a stool to rest on, she refused. When he offered to take over, she smiled faintly. "Cooking is my fight," she said. "Let me fight it." By the time the stew was served, the cabin was silent except for the crackle of firewood. The men ate with a kind of reverence, not just for the food, but for the spirit behind it. Ethan watched them, his massive hands resting on the table, his mind already turning with the thought of retribution. If the Blackthorn gang thought they could break someone like Martha, they didn't know what kind of storm was waiting for them. And in that silence, a promise was forged, not with words, but with the resolve that Martha's broken hand would not be the end of her story, but the beginning of something much greater. The next morning, Silver Valley was cloaked in mist. Ethan Graves rose before dawn, his boots thudding heavy across the wooden floorboards as he strapped on his gun belt. His mind was set. The Blackthorn gang had gone too far. It wasn't just about cattle theft or land disputes anymore. They had dared to crush the spirit of a woman who was the heart of his ranch. Martha's courage had lit a fire in him he could no longer contain. Martha herself was already awake, struggling to knead dough with one hand. Ethan tried to stop her, but she waved him off with a weary smile. "Don't look at me like I'm broken," she said softly. "They already tried to take my pride. Don't let them take my purpose too." Her words struck him like hammer blows. This wasn't just about food. This was about resilience, survival, and proving that no cruelty could snuff out the human spirit. By noon, word had spread across the valley that Ethan Graves was riding to Blackthorn's camp. Men from his ranch, fueled by loyalty and Martha's example, saddled their horses and followed him. When the giant rancher appeared at the outlaw camp, his shadow alone made the Blackthorn gang falter. The men who had mocked and brutalized Martha suddenly realized they weren't facing just one woman anymore. They were facing the wrath of a rancher whose heart burned hotter than wildfire. Ethan dismounted slowly, towering over them like a storm about to break. He didn't draw his gun at first. Instead, he spoke, his voice steady as the earth. You thought breaking her hand would stop her. But all you did was show us who you are, cowards who prey on the strong. You don't understand what kind of fire you tried to smother. The gang laughed nervously. But when Ethan's men spread out behind him, the laughter died. A fight broke out, wild, brutal, and short-lived. Ethan, with fists like iron, struck down man after man the Blackthorns, learned quickly why he was called the Giant. Every blow he delivered was fueled by Martha's defiance, every swing a message that cruelty had no place in their valley. By the end, the gang lay scattered, their pride broken worse than Martha's hand. When Ethan returned to the ranch, bloodied but unbowed, Martha was waiting by the fire. She had managed to cook a loaf of bread, though her bandaged hand trembled. She looked up at him with tired eyes, and for the first time in days, she smiled. "Told you I'd keep cooking," she whispered. Ethan, towering and fierce, knelt beside her. "And I'll keep fighting," he replied. "As long as you keep that fire burning." The ranch crew gathered around, eating the bread in silence, each man knowing he had witnessed something far greater than a simple fight or meal. They had seen courage in its purest form, the unbreakable spirit of a settler, cook in the unstoppable might of a rancher who refused to let her stand alone. And as the fire crackled and Martha's laughter returned faintly to the cabin, the valley itself seemed to grow quieter, stronger, and more alive.